we had covered 2.52 and a bit of 2.53, but because of some internet issues we had to break off. So let's take it up from there only. In the last section we were talking about how Krishna is explaining a person can become perfected in consciousness, that is, can attain samadhi. So we had also discussed that samadhi doesn't essentially mean, sitting in a trance and not being aware of the surroundings, being completely oblivious of what is going on around him. Actually, samadhi means being in perfected transcendental consciousness, which means a person who has discovered and understood the essence of existence, that this is the way I need to think, this is the way I need to invest my consciousness. So that is the samadhi, the real samadhi that Krishna is explaining to Arjun. So let's say the prayers and then we will start with the shloka number 2.53. Let's complete that. And also let's take up 2.54, which is the beginning of the next section. And in between these two, we'll also do a little bit of review to see what have we done till now and what is Krishna starting on in the next section. Om Agyantimirandhasya Gyananjan Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshtarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Let's read 2.53 once again. Shruti viprita pipanna te yada sthasyati nischala samadhava achala buddhis tada yogam avapsyasi. Srila Prabhupada translates this: when your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, and when it remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, then you will have attained the divine consciousness. So when Krishna speaks about samadhi, samadhau, as referred to in this shloka, he's actually talking about the transcendental or the divine consciousness, or in other words, the ideal state in which our consciousness needs to be. So in the past we have discussed about the different types of consciousness. The original source of consciousness is the soul. But we see that different living organisms have different levels of consciousness. We see there is consciousness, there is soul in plants also. But we can't see the plants to respond, very, say, markedly to external situations. हम अगर plant को थप्पड़ लगा देंगे तो वो respond back नहीं करेगा. That is why the trees are called the most tolerant. And in fact, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that one should learn to be tolerant as a tree. Now, the point arises, however, even in the human beings, there are different types of consciousness levels. According to biology, human beings are just one species, Homo sapiens. And if we talk of the subspecies, it is Homo sapiens sapiens. There is no other type of human being on earth, only one single type. But according to our Shastras, the human beings also consist of 4 lakh different species. But that's not based on the external body. That's based on the internal consciousness. The consciousness emerging from the soul. So, as we see, the consciousness can be at very different levels. In chapter 3, we also talk about, in fact, Krishna talks about how consciousness can be covered by different degrees of lust, and can be very, very explicit or can be very, very, implicit and covered. But here in this case, Krishna is asking Arjun to perfect the consciousness. For every living being, to perfect the consciousness means to be in the realization that I am the soul and I am an eternal servitor of Krishna. That's my real identity. That's my real duty. That's my eternal duty. Now you might say, is my eternal duty to be a servant to Krishna? Well, the word servant has somewhat, not such nice connotation. It doesn't, seem nice to be a servant of someone. But I think we have talked about this before also, that being a servant of Krishna is actually not being a servant in the context of this material world. No, to serve Krishna means to be as happy and blissful as the master himself. Because Krishna is such a perfect master that if you serve him, he doesn't make you feel like a servant at all. In fact, he is ready to serve his devotees. There are so many instances, we discussed before also, when Krishna himself is serving his devotees. Now, if you see in Bhagavad Gita, if you see the cover page of the Bhagavad Gita and most of the books, you'll find who is actually the Rathi, who is the master of the chariot. It is Arjun, because Arjun is the one who is fighting. And who is the one who is drawing the horses, who is moving the chariot, who is the Sarathi? It's Krishna. So who is in the capacity of the servant? Krishna is in the capacity of the servant. You see, so being a servitor to Krishna actually means a very beautiful relationship. It really doesn't translate into a typical master-servant relationship. It's the most beautiful of relationships, with the person serving deriving more benefit than the person who is receiving the servitorship. Now, isn't that wonderful? If you are serving someone, you would think that the person I'm serving is getting all the benefit, but it's not like that in the spiritual realm. The person who is serving actually derives more pleasure than the person you're serving. That's the reason why Krishna is always very, very eager to serve his devotees, like he's doing for Arjun here. So, to be in perfect consciousness means to discharge one's duties in serving Krishna in one way or the other. In one way or the other. There are different ways in which we can serve Krishna according to our own makeup. As we say, according to our own swabhav, our own, to be more precise, in our own swarup, So, because somebody likes to be a friend to Krishna, somebody likes to be, neutral towards Krishna and just serve him by providing flowers. Somebody likes to be a parent to Krishna. So, we have our own type, or own specific type of swarup in which we would like to serve Krishna. So, Krishna gives us that independence, that independence is there. The kind of service you like to do is, of course, your own prerogative, what you like, and Krishna actually loves every single devotee equally well and has a unique relationship with every devotee. Krishna likes serious devotees also. If you're the serious types, Krishna likes funny devotees also. If you're that type, So you can have your own style and yet completely absorb yourself in serving Krishna in a unique, blissful, exchangeful relationship with him. So that's the perfection of realization. And here Srila Prabhupada is further translating and giving us the purport that Krishna is again, saying that don't be attracted by the flowery words of the Vedas. We have done this before, right? That the Vedas are flowery words. They attract you with promises of sense gratification. You do this yajna, you will get that. You do that puja, you will get that. But ultimately, this is all leading to entanglement here only, right? So Krishna is again warning, the words of the Vedas are very, very flowery. Arjun, don't get caught up in that, but try to perfect your consciousness. Get above all this. Nishtraya gunya bhav Arjuna. Rise above the three modes with which the Vedas deal. Also remember, the words of the Vedas are flowery, but full of poison. Because ultimately you are going to get bondage. You have heard about bonded labor, right? So we are into actually something like that in this material world. We are in bonded labor. So again, in the end of this purport, Srila Prabhupada is telling us that a person who has perfected his intelligence and is in perfect Krishna consciousness comes in direct communion with Krishna. He develops a direct relationship, direct communication with Krishna, and he receives his instructions of what to do and how to serve him. As we were talking, Krishna takes care that he actually takes a lot of care to develop a kind of relationship that suits or matches the swarup of the devotee. So we can get the instructions of what kind of service we do through Krishna. Obviously, sometimes for very elevated devotees, this may be a direct, instruction. Basically, it's more for us through the spiritual master. So, Srila Prabhupada tells us a beautiful thing, One might think that if I'm serving Krishna, if that's the purpose of my life, what happens to so much knowledge that there is in the scriptures? How will I come to know how if I don't, keep reading all those things and become a jnani? So Srila Prabhupada says here that a devotee is never lacking in knowledge because a devotee is given the knowledge by Krishna from within, So there are different forms of transfer of knowledge. People might think that if I have an exam tomorrow, if I sleep over the book like this, the knowledge would, be transferred into my brain by osmosis, and that might sound very, very funny to you, very, very impossible to you, which it is, in material world, you cannot transfer knowledge from the book to your brain through osmosis. But in the spiritual world, there are different ways of transferring knowledge. And the most important one is that Krishna, if he knows that the devotee is sincere and committed, can transfer the entire knowledge that is to be learned from all the scriptures in the heart of the devotee directly. So a devotee is never challenged as to where his knowledge is going to come from. He has no dearth of knowledge. So with these two shlokas, 52 and 53, Krishna is actually coming to the end of a section. Let's just go back to chapter 2 when we started. If you remember, the shloka number 1 to 10 were actually more doubts and more questions by Arjun. In 7th shloka, Arjun had said, I am becoming your disciple, Krishna, please become my guru and please guide me. In next 8th shloka, I think he says that I'm not finding any way to come over this grief, Krishna. Please help me out of this very perplexing situation. But after that we see Arjun has not been speaking. Krishna starts speaking and he is the only one speaking, and Arjun is just listening with rapt attention. It's only now in shloka number 54 that Arjun again begins to speak. So from 1 to 10 were again Arjun's doubts and somewhat questioning going on again and again. And from there, from 11 to 30, Krishna gives the knowledge of the self, the Atma Gyan, right? That you are not the body. He tells the characteristics of the body, of the soul. What is the soul? What does it look like? What is the size of the soul? Where does it live? What are the symptoms of the soul? And, we studied about how a soul is eternal. It cannot be destroyed by, fire weapons. It cannot be wetted by water or dried up by wind. So he's telling the features of the Atma in the shlokas from 11 to 30. From there onwards, he starts with the Karma Kand argument. In 11 to 30, he's actually answering Arjun's objection that I will not be compassionate if I kill my relatives and teachers. So the compassion argument is countered by Krishna in verses 11 to 30 saying, you are being compassionate towards the bodies of these relatives, Arjun, but these are not actually bodies, these are souls. And even if you kill them because of your commitment to dharma, don't worry, you are actually not harming, you will not be able to harm the Atma or the real identities of your relatives, the soul of the relatives. So that the compassion should not be directed towards the bodies, but towards the soul. Then later, from 31 onwards to 38, Krishna tells Arjun about Karma Kand. Okay, Arjun had one more objection. Then I will not be able to enjoy if I kill my relatives. Who will I enjoy with? The enjoyment argument, na? So Krishna says, don't worry, Arjun. If you do your duties properly as a Kshatriya, because you are in the Varnashram system, you are a Kshatriya. So being a Kshatriya, if you are doing your duties properly, then you will be able to enjoy. Because if you die, you go to heaven. If you live here, you will get the kingdom of the earth. And don't worry, you will still enjoy. So enjoyment argument is countered, 11 to 38. Then from 39 to 53, Krishna is talking about Nishkam Karma Yoga. Okay, then he says to Arjun, Arjun, okay, now rise above the argument of Karma Kand. Karma Kand is okay, but I think you have a higher consciousness. So learn to work in the consciousness that you are working for, not for fruitive results, not for getting any fruits like going to heavens or like enjoying the kingdom here. So don't worry too much about enjoyment, Arjun. This is the consciousness of a person who is down below, not like a person like you who is much more knowledgeable than that, who has a higher consciousness than that. So learn to work not for fruits, but for the sake of the duty itself, for the sake of work itself. And better still, Krishna is also giving a hint about Buddhi Yoga, that learn to work for me. That's the best reason to work. The best cause for which you can work is to work for me. Work because I desire so. So that is Nishkam Karma Yoga, which culminates in him explaining that you will be in perfect samadhi if you work in the consciousness that you have to please me. You have to follow my will. So with that we end with 53. Now 54 to 72. That's the last shloka of this chapter. Is the last section of this chapter, in which Arjun has started a series of discussion in which he has questioned Krishna about who is that person, what kind of a person is he who is in perfect divine consciousness. So this is what Krishna is going to answer from here onwards. So the shloka number 54 is actually Arjun's very relevant question. Arjun uvacha sthita pragyasya ka bhasha samadhi sthasya keshava sthita dhihi kim prabhasheta kim asita vrajeta kim. So Arjun is asking Krishna that this person who you are talking about in the last few verses, the person with perfected intelligence, sthit pragyasya. So pragya means intelligence, sthit means steady. So who is this person with steady intelligence? Explain about him to me, Krishna. I want to know what this person is like. So in the first 140 says, sthit pragyasya ka bhasha. So, oh Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? You just talked about, divine consciousness, right? Yes, Krishna? So, tell me, what are the symptoms? Ka bhasha. Bhasha actually means language, but spoken of in these terms, it actually means the symptoms. What kind of symptoms that this kind of a person have? Then he says, Samadhi sthasya keshava, which means a person who is in samadhi, transcendental perfected consciousness. O Keshava, O killer of the Keshi demon, or O Krishna who has beautiful hair. Sthita dih kim prabhasheta. So person with the sthita dhi again means intelligence. So person with steady intelligence, how does he speak? Prabhasheta. How does he speak? What is the manner of his speech? And then Kim Asit, which means how does he sit? Vrajet kim? How does he walk? Now the question seems pretty simple, Actually, I'm actually reminded of the Miss Universe, Miss World type of competitions, where the contestants wear a certain kind of dress, walk in a certain way in front of the judges, speak in certain mannerisms, sit in a certain, I would say, style. So, and they're actually judged on all these points, right? And then, of course, they decide who is the person fit to be Miss Universe or Miss World. So, apparently, from the surface it seems, is Arjun asking Krishna about these external features of this person who has steady consciousness? Actually, if you look deeply, this has a much more deep meaning, because Arjun is not really asking about how exactly this person sits. By sitting, he actually means how does he regulate his senses? How does he keep his senses away from the sense objects? Just to recall a little bit, the senses are very, very eager to connect with sense objects. For example, eyes are always very eager to connect or to see with something which is beautiful and pleasing and enjoyable to us. Ears are always very eager to hear something very pleasant, beautiful sounds, things like that. Something which gives us enjoyment, sense enjoyment, right? Similarly, the tongue is very eager to connect with something which is going to give it taste. Similarly, we have these senses, the touch, the sense of touch. We want to touch something which is soft and very, very sensual, maybe, right? So all these senses have a general tendency to connect with pleasant sense objects. So Krishna is being asked by Arjun, how is it that this person restrains his senses from indulging too much and connecting too much with the sense objects? Because if you really think about this, when we indulge too much in, connecting the senses with the sense objects, if we indulge too much in, say, watching a movie or watching our cell phones, maybe we're sleeping and still watching a video, it invariably results in bad consequences. We might not get a good night's sleep, our mind will be overworked, we get stressed out. Similarly, if we eat too much of, whatever is pleasant to us, suppose we like eating chola bhaturas and we eat a little too much of that because we are liking that contact of the tongue with the chola bhaturas, we know what happens afterwards. So, the point is that indulgence into sense objects invariably results in some bad results for us, bad consequences for us. So Arjun is asking, this person in perfect consciousness, how does he restrain his senses so that they don't indulge, regulate? How does he regulate? Vrajet kim, how does he walk? Not really walk like as in catwalk in the Miss Universe competition. Walk as in how does he move about in this world? How does he conduct himself? How does he use his senses in a very restrained manner? So the question is actually quite deep, and in the purport, Srila Prabhupada gives us some very interesting analogies that just like every person in this world is going to have some symptoms, Suppose I tell of you of a very rich friend I have. Immediately you will start to conjure up an image. Immediately you'll make an image of that friend in your mind. Oh, this person must be having some attitude, must be getting down from a big car, in style, dressed up nicely, and will talk with a flair, things like that. So we get an image. So a person who is rich will have his symptoms. What kind of symptoms does a person who is diseased expect to have? He will be slow in moving, will have a down pulled face, not very jolly to talk to, irritable, like that. So he will have his own symptoms. Similarly, Srila Prabhupada says that a person who's very knowledgeable, knowledgeable. So he also will have his symptoms. He will have a certain way of talking, very sober way of talking. And similarly, a person who is in transcendental consciousness will also have certain symptoms by which he can be recognized. Can't we recognize a saintly person amidst a big group, even if the person is not talking, even by his mannerisms, we are able to recognize that this person is on a different platform of consciousness. So Krishna is going to answer all these questions eventually in the further shlokas. However, Srila Prabhupada gives us a peek into what's going to be said in the further verses by saying that all these symptoms are very important, and particularly important is the way in which such a person speaks. The mannerism of speech is very important. It actually gives away what's going on in the mind of a person. And Srila Prabhupada makes a very interesting but a very, very authentic statement that a person, it is said that a fool is undiscovered as long as he does not speak. A person may be a fool, but if he's very well dressed and if he manages to carry himself with a good attitude, you might be fooled into thinking that he's a very cultured person. But as soon as he begins to speak, as soon as he opens the mouth, you are able to recognize him for what he is. Isn't that so? So Srila Prabhupada is saying that mannerism of speech is one of the most important symptom by which you can recognize a person who is in perfected divine transcendental consciousness, right? And in the last sentence of the purport, Srila Prabhupada gives also an insight into how such a person will speak. So he says a person in perfected consciousness will always speak directly or indirectly about Krishna, which means he will be fully aware of Krishna's presence in his own life. He will be fully aware of Krishna's presence in the others' hearts. He will be fully conscious of everything around himself being Krishna's energy. So anything that he says is going to be in tune with his inner consciousness of being fully invested in Krishna all the time. Oh, beautiful shloka. Although just a question, simple question from Arjun, but a wonderful question. This is because Krishna is going to answer all these questions and give us also an idea about how such a person must behave in the world. So we'll get together next time with the next shlokas 55 onwards in the last section of this chapter. Now, truly speaking, this chapter is called the Contents of the Gita Summarized or Gita Sar. And actually, Krishna has told almost everything to Arjuna in this. But we know a student while hearing in the class manages to hear only about 20-30%. Manages to hear only that much and retain even less, So if a student is asked, what exactly do you recall from the class? He will probably be able to just quote a few statements, some things that he liked particularly or didn't like particularly, but only a few statements. He will not be able to reproduce the entire class. So actually, Krishna has given the entire knowledge to Arjun here, but Arjun, for our benefit, is going to now ask questions so that the subject matter can be revised more schematically and presented by Krishna in various ways in the following chapters. With that, let's finish up with today's session. Hare Krishna to all of you. Please chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, and always be in Krishna consciousness.